Hello, welcome again, my friends. This is Mulenge Speaks series, and today we'll continue with part 6, but we'll take part 6B, section B. We said last night that we'll be talking about section 2 on settlement. But before we go there, I would like to to go back a little bit and repeat what I was trying to explain. I was trying to explain that before 1960, we had two kind of citizenship. First in the Congo Free State and second in the Belgium Congo. In between 1884 and 1908, we had what we called the ethnic citizenship. Why? Because those people, those kingdom, or all the traditional leader or customary leaders and their tradition and customs were part of each and particular kingdom. So they have their own citizenship, which we call ethnic citizenship. Then when we moved from 1908 to 1960, we're still Belgium Congo, but we had another citizenship because the Congo now was being created. So they were creating a new citizenship based on the state, on the overall, the combination of all the ethnic citizenship that were existed before. They were all combined into one constitution or into one nationality, which became later the nationality, the Congo nationality. And so each individual kingdom had its own constitution, had its own citizenship. And on the other hand, on the other side of the river and Lake Kivu, all the population, all the people that were under the direction or the control of King Rwabugiri, before him King Rugera, had also their own citizenship, which was Banyarwanda citizenship. And so every time they came to the other side of the river or the lake, when they crossed into the the newly created Congo Free State, they were not Congolese. They were subject of the King of Rwanda, because they carried with them the name of Banyarwanda, so they were subject of the King of Rwanda, who remained in the Rwanda territory. So every state in the Congo Free State, every state or country or entity recognized them. They knew them, that they were subject of another king. And so during that period when they came, they start settling, as we saw in section A, when they start settling in these areas, different areas in the bush in the north, in the Bafuliro and the Bavira in the south, then in the far west in the Bashi and the Babembe in the far south, they were still recognized as subject of King of Rwanda. That's why they carry that name of Banyarwanda. But before we continue now to see before 1960 and after 1960, how they were still being called, I want to introduce two other witnesses and see how even the colonial authority accepted the traditional leader as the factor, people that they were going to work together. And so King Leopold II of Belgium was the only legislative branch, because he was the one who was putting in place those decree law, and he had, of course, his council that were advising him how to control and govern the colony that he just created in Central Africa. So we have to go back a little bit and understand that King Leopold II recognized the existence of the customary authority, the traditional authority, which we call the La Coutume. They recognized it, and they had to decide what to do with it. So, for example, as we read, if we read another author here, if we read A. Dimon, in his paper, Le gouvernement du Congo belge et l'institution indigène in 1943, page 78 to 90. Again, if you read A. Dimon in his paper, Le gouvernement du Congo belge et les institutions indigènes, published in 1943, page 78 and page 90, 78 to 90, he says that the Royal Decree Law of April 27th, 1889, that's only 4 years after the creation of the newly Congo Free State. This decree recognized the effective jurisdiction of local kings and implementation of indigene practice everywhere and every time there was a committed offense by a native that could result in harming another native. I repeat what they recognize. That's what he's writing here. He's writing, I quote, the Congo Free State recognized the effective jurisdiction of local kings and implementation of indigenous practice every time there was a committed offense by a native that could result in harming another native. End of quote. So in French he said, cette loi de 1889 reconnaissait la juridiction effective du chef local et l'application des coutumes indigènes chaque fois qu'une infraction était commise par un natif au préjudice d'un autre natif. So that's one decree that we have to go back and see how they recognize the traditional leaders. Also, we have also to recognize the decree of December 1933 on native area or circonscription indigène in French, and the Royal Decree Law of November 1923 and June 1934 on extra customary centers, or in French, les centres extra coutumiers. So following these laws and the intent of the colonial authority on how to govern and administer the newly created Congo Free State, and how they're gonna govern and control the different tribe and tradition, King and Council had to decide how to go about these indigenous leaders. So of course they chose to integrate the customary laws in their framework. In doing so, they also decided to write constitutions. And we know that from the beginning of the creation of the Congo Republic, or Congo Free State, to Belgium Congo, to Congo Democratic, we had 3 constitutions. The first one was created between 1885 and 1908, which were called the Colonial Charter, or La Charte de l'État indépendant du Congo. This charter recognized the existence of local authority and local customers, leaders. And also we had what was called the Fundamental Law of the Congo, La Loi Fondamentale du Congo, which was enacted between 1908 to 1964. You can see here that I did not say 1960. For those who know the history of Congo, we know that the independence of the DRC took place in 1960, but the constitution was not enacted until the 1st August 1964. So that means that this Loi Fondamentale du Congo continued to be effective, to be used until the end of August 1964. And of course we have the same law, the same constitution, which was called La Constitution de Lualaba, which was enacted on the 1st of August 1964. So these 3 laws, before we came to before Mobutu took power, these 3 laws recognized the existence of customary laws. And so, as they recognize them, they have to make sure that they were part of their framework, their structure, political structure, economical structure, and social structure. Now, being said, how did now people who came to do some research in this part of the country, how did they recognize, how did they call the Banyarwanda who were living in that part? Did they recognize them as indigenous people? Did they recognize them as Banyarwanda? Did they call them a different name compared to those that were living with them, compared to those other customary leaders? And so I'm going to call upon some names with their references, their books and page and the year of their research, and found out how do they call these Banyarwanda who were living there. Maybe they may come and tell you that we are insulting them by calling them Banyarwanda, but were they Banyarwanda or they were not Banyarwanda? If today they may decide to change their name or their ID or their identity, that's their choice. But we cannot just throw away the history just to please them. So we have to teach our own generation. We have culture. I have a culture. I have a mother tongue culture. I have a culture. I speak a culture that I have to preserve, like any other person in the world, like any other population, like any other country. Every country, every society has a culture that they have to defend, they have to preserve, they have to teach the next generation. And so, for example, apart from the Royal Decree Law of 1891, which identified the people that were coming from Rwanda as the indigenous of neighboring colonies. That's how they will call them. In French, we call them les indigènes des colonies voisines. So these were recognized already in 1891. So even the Belgians themselves, they cannot be accused of being racist or people that were not, they did not love the Batusi or the Bahutu or the Banyarwanda. But at this particular time, 1891, they were already making this distinction between the tribes that were in the Congo Free State and those who were coming or those who were running from the other part of the region. So they had a law that were distinctively separate them from the local leaders, the local population. And so they were called the indigenous of neighboring colony. And so we continue. In 1954, George West, in his book Le Pays du Vira, or the Vira country, at page 123, he recognized that there were some Banyarwanda in some villages in the Bavira country, which here we know that was the chieftain of the kingdom or the kingdom of Bavira. And so he said that at this page 123, he recognized that there were some Banyarwanda in the village of Kishembwe, which he described here as village Rwanda de Kishembwe. Village Rwanda de Kishembwe. Rwanda here, we know from the history of the world that there is only one Rwanda. There is no Rwanda in the DRC. The only Rwanda that we know is the Rwanda that exists to this day, which is under the leadership of Paul Kagame. And so when he says there is a Rwanda village in Kishembwe, he means the population that are called by that name, which is Banyarwanda. We have the second person, Jean-Marie de Perchin. In his 1974 PhD paper, I told you last time, he wrote on page 32, a quote, administratively, the Rwanda do not have a chiefship of their own. They live in Fuliru and Vira chiefships. I'm going to repeat that quotation. On page 32 of his paper, the Perchin wrote, administratively, the Rwanda do not have a chiefship of their own. They live in Fuliru and Vira chiefships. So this is clear again. This population here, in 1974, the Perchin still call them the Rwanda. They don't have any other identification. They are not called by a local name. They are not called by another name. They are not even called the Tutsi. they are called the Banyarwanda, or in short, the Rwanda. On page 118 of his book, he wrote, Stanley and Bourton met representative of Muluta, first Mwami of the Vira. Meaning that at least he recognized that there were a Mwami, there was a king of a population, of a local population. He did not say he was a Mwami or king of the Bafulero or Mwami of the Banyarwanda. He said at this time, when Stanley was using that route to go to the source of Nile, he passed through this land. And one of the land that he passed through the land of Mwami Mutula, and so Muluta, and then so he met his representative before going toward the north, passing through the Bafulero land to the Bashi land. We have another witness, André Lubanda, in Conflit au Kivu, Antécédents et Angers, a book that he published in 1966. He wrote, I quote, the Rwanda were given permission to settle in the valley of Runingu, at Kajembo, at Bwegera, and Kinanira, the region that we call Kakamba, or the region that is called Kakamba. Also, this is him here on in his book 1966. And then this quotation is repeated by the Persian on page 81 of his paper. We have also another witness, Dr. Iman Mkeyo, in his Exposé sur la biodiversité de l'Itombwe, published in 2000, at page 7, he wrote, les immigrés Tutsi rwandais se sont installés à Luemba, puis à Tulambo, pour la mise en application du projet d'élevage colonial dénommé Élite. C'est à partir de 1960 qu'une vague la plus importante des Tutsis rwandais a envahi l'Itombwe, notamment les réfugiés. So again, even in 2000, with his research, Dr. Iman Mkeyo here recognized that there were some people, or there were some population called by Rwanda, the Tutsi Rwandais. So the Rwanda or the Banyarwanda that were installed in Luemba and Tulambo. Luemba that is in the Babembe territory, and Tulambo that is in the Warega territory. And we go back to West, George West, in his book of 1954, but published in 1959, at the page 112. What did he tell you? What he said on page 123. And now we go back to a little bit back on page 112. He states, I quote, contrast again between a relative stability of Vira settlement below the PMO and an open instability everywhere else. Rwanda village on the high PMO, mobile and most recent population, and barely fixed at the PMO. If I read this part in French, for those who are francophone, it says, at this the same page here, 112, it says, contraste encore entre une relative stabilité du peuplement Vira sur les bas versants et une instabilité régnante partout ailleurs. Population très mêlée du Piémont, village Rwanda mobile sur les hauts versants, population très récente et à peine fixée sur les plateaux. So again, West at page 112, he's saying that the Banyarwanda or the Rwanda were living there and they were recent immigrants in the region. So we can see from our list here that we have people that came to do some research in the region, and they identified everyone who was living there, including the Banyarwanda. They did not call them by another name. They did not give you a new identification, but they called them by what they were, the Banyarwanda. And they were still, at this date, the subject of the kingdom of Rwanda. Another witness is Roberto Garreton. In his report on the situation of human rights in Zaire, that's a report that he submitted to the UN Human Rights Council in 1996. He said, I quote, the Rwanda migrated to Congo, Zaire, and settled in Kakamba zone on the slope of Ruzizi River. This is in 1996 in his report, when he was sent to Zaire then to go and do some research on human rights violation. He wrote, this report exists at the UN quarters in New York. He wrote, the Rwanda migrated to Congo Zaire and settled in Kakamba zone on the slope of Ruzizi River. What about themselves? When there was a sovereign national conference in 1991, in June 1991 in Kinshasa in Congo, they had to go and represent themselves. So they wrote a memo. In that memo, they recognized that they were called Banyarwanda, and then to give some explanation of their presence in the region, they explained and they said that in 1904, they were still at Kakamba. That's in their own memo that they wrote to the National Conference in 1991. So all these are sources that we have to support our debate that from the beginning, the Banyarwanda moved or crossed into the what we call today the Eastern Congo, but they came with an identity, and they were identified as Banyarwanda. They had a king. They came into a land that also had kings, and those kings recognized them, received them, the population received them, they settled together, they lived together, they cohabitated. But now, today, what we are seeing or what we are experiencing and what they are telling the international community is that they have always been the native of those lands in Eastern Congo. But we have shown you that it is a lie, it is not true. And so next time in the following clips, we're going to explain what kind of lies they are selling out there. What are they telling you? When we meet, when they protest, what are they telling you? They are calling themselves, we are from Mulenge. But what does it mean to be from Mulenge? Are you from Mulenge because you reside there? Are you from Mulenge because you visited there? Are you from Bijombo because you visited there or because you reside there? Are you paying taxes or tribute to a king or a chief that exists there? Is the land belong to you? Did you chase the people who were living in Mulenge? Did you chase the people who were living in Bijombo or Itombwe or Lulenge? Did you chase those people to occupy the land? Like when the Bantu came, they chased away the Pygmies. Did they chase away those people and then they took over and they settled and established their kingdom? And who was it their king? We know already that in 1880, the king who was chasing them, who was the cause of their migration, was called King Rwabugiri. And so, if they did not come during King Rwabugiri, if they came before King Rwabugiri, who was their king in the territory or the area that we call today Eastern Congo, or the territory they are claiming today? That is Mulenge, that is Bijombo, that is Minembwe, that is Itombwe, that is Lulenge. All those territories they are claiming that they are on, that they have been always living there since I don't know when. So we're gonna try to explain that next time, and we hope that from here we're gonna expose, we're gonna tell you what kind of lie they are selling you, one by one, from the name of the territory, of the region, of the place, of the village, to the name of identification that they put on their card, on the application for citizenship, when they come to, when they immigrate in different countries, the name that they carry on their back. So we're going to explain that so that you can have an idea, you can have a broad understanding of what's going on in Eastern Congo, so that you have a judgment that is based on the truth and not based on the deception. So we hope that we'll meet again next time, and so stay tuned and watch for clip number 8. And so I'll encourage you to like the clip and video, try to comment if you have a comment, and share it so that everybody can know what's going on. So thank you again for watching. Next time. Bye.